Should your cash game strategy be the same whether you're battling at the nosebleeds or dipping your toes in at the micros? Or are there things that you should be focusing on more when you're playing at low stakes? I'm Nick Eastwood, or Easty22, and today I'm going to give you 5 tips for low stakes cash game strategy. Simplify your strategy. If you're playing high stakes, a complex strategy makes a lot of sense. Players are better and more well studied the higher up you go. But at low stakes, this just isn't necessary. You should simplify your strategy to be as easy to understand and execute as possible. There's no need to mix frequencies or fall into the trap of fancy play syndrome. This is for 2 important reasons. Firstly, your opponents are significantly likely to be playing at a level that could exploit a simplified strategy. Remember, you only need to beat what's in front of you, and preparing a highly complex strategy for low-stakes opponents not only isn't necessary, it's also very difficult and may just be downright bad against the players you'll see on a daily basis. Secondly, and more importantly, an inferior strategy that's well executed is far better than an advanced strategy executed poorly, so keep things simple. Play exploitatively. This is similar to my previous tip, but it's more specific. The fact is that there is a much higher volume of weaker opponents at lower stakes than at high stakes, and they are all making far more errors that we can and should punish. For example, you might be playing against a player that just won't fold. You've seen them around a few times, tried a few bluffs, but they always seem to call you down with a weak hand. Well, the first thing to do is take a note, either with a label or by writing something about them to remind you of their tendencies. The next time you see them, even if you have a prime candidate to bluff, just don't, because we know it's going to be underfolded. However, when we have a good hand or even a mediocre hand, it's appropriate to value bet more aggressively. Bet huge with your big hands and extract value with hands that you may not be able to bet against other players. So, identify a weakness, take note, and push your edge to the limit. Play in position. At the lower stakes, a lot of players tend to hugely undervalue position. The player in position gets to act last on all streets, and this comes with significant advantages. You get to see what your opponent does before you act, meaning we often have more information that we might not have had if we had to act first. Having position makes it much easier to navigate almost every situation, so the more often we can play in position, the more profitable we are likely to be. What's more is that, as I already alluded to, players at low stakes tend to play a lot more hands out of position than they should. This gives us many more opportunities to play pots with the upper hand, so look to play as many pots as you can in position and try to avoid marginal hands in situations where you'd be out of position. Consider the rake. Something that a lot of players at the low stakes may overlook is the rake and how it should influence their strategy. The rake is the percentage taken from each pot when a hand reaches the flop, and at lower stakes, these percentages tend to be higher. So how should this affect our strategy? Well, you're going to want to play a bit tighter, call a lot less pre-flop, and do more raising instead. This is because when you call, you're getting a worse price than a lower rake structure. Consider cutting out some of the more marginal hands, because they may no longer be profitable after the rake is accounted for. At the same time, try 3-betting more often rather than calling pre-flop. If you take down a hand pre-flop, you don't pay any rake at all, making a 3-bet or fold strategy very viable at lower stakes. Slow play less. My last tip for low stakes cash games is to slow play less, and I mean a lot less. It can feel really smart and tricky to slow play a big hand, but almost all the time at low stakes, it's just costing you money. This is because slow playing in part is reliant on your opponent. When we're slow playing, we need our opponents to put in the money for us, either by bluffing or value betting themselves. The reality is that a lot of players at low stakes don't bluff, or even value bet as often as they should. And if they don't reopen the action, we get no value from our strong hands. At the same time, players at low stakes probably call a little bit too much. When facing a river bet, they get to close the action by calling, which is a much more comfortable feeling than betting a hand they're not certain is good, or bluffing a hand that they know is definitely not good. On top of that, these players tend to be inelastic to bet sizes, meaning that they're not much more likely to fold to a large bet than they are to a small one. This means that by betting ourselves, we can get even more value by betting very large with our strong hands rather than slow playing. So those are my 5 tips on low stakes cash game strategy, and I hope there's at least one that you're able to incorporate into your own game. Let us know which one tip you think could be the most useful to you in the comments below, and good luck at the tables. Ace State Poker, made to play.